Welcome post-lunch. Thank you for giving us your time. We hope that it will be an exciting time. I'm Ryan. I'm from 2U. This is Jenna. I think everyone now knows Jenna from the previous talk. And then we have a very important person who is not with us in the room, in the conference today, Santiago, who really helped a ton with this presentation. Actually wrote the background document behind this presentation and this process. So ton of credit goes to Santiago. But we're here representing the product management working group. So we're the ones speaking, but we're not the only ones doing the work. So heads up on that. Real quick show of hands. How many of you are what I would consider to be product-minded in your daily work on edX? So designer, product manager type person, maybe an engineer with a little bit of flair. Yeah, there we go. How many of you are more like engineer focused, like very hardcore technical engineering focused? Awesome. You're welcome here too, friends. I was not doing that to like isolate you, just to get a sense of the audience. So this slide, Jenna mentioned, I used a slide similar to this. I didn't get quite the exact slide, but I ripped off another one from the internet. And it really made me think about sort of its connection with our talk today, which is all about the working group's general sort of vibe over the last year has been to try to get product more engaged in the edX contribution pipeline. So that really means trying to get folks who are product-minded engaged earlier in the process. And so today's presentation is going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges we've seen over the time that has made that hard, and then proposing a new way to get product a little bit sort of involved at an earlier stage. Hopefully that was your expectations, but if it wasn't, we'll find out soon. So some of the problems that we've seen in terms of when a contribution comes in to one of the repos that's in the edX community is that product-minded folks, like many of you in this room, are not always aware that there is new things coming in. There are new ideas, new contributions coming in, and are sometimes not brought into the process until the very end, when a pull request is being made by an engineer to put new code into the platform, which is really post-investment by that person who put in a lot of work and effort to make an improvement to the platform. And sometimes that can cause conflict because there may be like a reason why we may not want that thing in right now, or maybe there's a scope issue, or maybe there's a conflict with a big giant project that's going on somewhere else in the organization. And the product-minded folks tend to be the ones who are seeing all that happen. And so it's a really good idea for us to kind of get involved early. So that's one of the problems we've seen. We've also seen valuable contributions getting slowed down because it gets submitted into a repo, and then the repo manager engineering group then calls in a product person to come in and kind of help them evaluate the contribution, and then that contribution gets slowed down because it's like wait, I didn't know what this is going on. Let me learn all about this from scratch, from the product person's perspective. So it's nice to be able to know about it ahead of time, so that when they get to that point where the contribution's actually going through the process of getting integrated into the platform, we're aware of it. And then there's no real clear process that empowers product managers to review, and there's not a lot of expectation for contributors to follow. So what we see is sometimes that PRs come in where, and by the way, the reason why I'm talking about PR so much is because 2U manages the majority of the repos. A lot of folks know that. And so we see all the PRs come in, and oftentimes as product folks in my organization, we get pulled in at the last minute, and we don't have the context, but we also don't see the value that the contribution is trying to create, because there may not be enough context in the PR submission to help us understand that value. And then roles and responsibilities just aren't clear. So who gets to approve things, who should approve things, who shouldn't approve things, who should have the opportunity to comment, who shouldn't have the opportunity to comment. So we're trying to clarify that with a new process in front of us. Jenna? Oh, I was pushing the button. I could have used the trigger.
Right, can you hear me? Yeah, Yeah, so again, I want to reiterate what Ryan said at the very beginning. Santiago Suarez from edX was the other major product manager who's been working on this project. Wasn't able to be here today. I'm actually kind of giving his slides on his behalf, but he's done a ton of work, and I just want to make sure we recognize what that is due. All right, so objectives for today. So Ryan just spent the last 5 minutes kind of laying out some of the problems and challenges, but we really want to focus on what do we do about it from here? How do we fix this process? How do we mitigate some of these challenges? And so we'd like to propose our process that we've been kind of iterating on over the last couple of months, put it out there for review and feedback from the group today. And we'll actually use some examples of PRs, active PRs, to demonstrate what this new process looks like and kind of use it as an opportunity to walk through some concrete examples of what this looks like in practice. We will also, like was the topic this morning, and as Ryan mentioned, the idea of submitting contributions to the roadmap is really key to making this a successful thing. Because if we don't know about the contributions that are coming, we don't have enough leeway then to talk about possible approaches, talk about ways of implementing it that make sense with how we're thinking about bigger platform strategy, which can create tension later when the PRs are about to be submitted. And so the earlier that contributions can be added to the roadmap from across the community, the better. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to do that and sort of what some of the expectations are around that process. And we will empower everyone here in the room to actually do reviews. This is a process that we want to open up to the community. We want to get as many people involved as possible. Like, we have a ton of knowledge about the community distributed across all of the different product leaders, across the different organizations, and we need that subject matter expertise really to help us review these and help us to move these forward through the pipeline. So we will help you to do that. And like I said, we will do this all by example. We're going to take everybody through a couple of live PRs, and you will see what it looks like kind of in progress. All right, so that arrow popped up a little early, but what I wanted to do is just a little bit of context and background. What does the process currently look like versus what are we proposing? So what are some of the key changes between what the process looks like now and what we're proposing it would look like going into the future? So let me just... So here are some of the challenges with the current workflow, right? So kind of let me step back here so I can actually see. There we go. So right now the process starts with the contributor, right? So the person in the community who wants to make the contribution has all of the PR information, has everything to submit to the platform. So it's already starting at the point where the work is done effectively, and it just needs to be reviewed and accepted. And that's one of the major changes that we'll talk about in a minute, but that we want to make, right? Some of that product documentation can be made available earlier, so it doesn't happen at the point where the work is already done. But as is, a well-intended contributor will create a GitHub PR draft. So this is all of the coding, right? By the time the code is written and about to be submitted, this is the process to submit it. It goes through the submission process, and then it goes to the repo. So if you're not familiar with GitHub, all of the code lives in what are repos, which are like small areas of the platform that contain code relevant to that part of the platform. So the PR will go to the engineer who manages the repo for that part of the platform. Then it goes to the product manager for review. And so
sometimes,
yeah, that's another thing that we've been working out. Like who has the responsibility? Who is the product owner for a lot of the repos, right? Like who is the person responsible for making decisions about what gets accepted, what doesn't, or how to make the PR better so it can be accepted. And this is one of the main things we want to change, right? Like this person should be involved, like here, right before the process even starts. But anyway, so currently we'll go to that repo, the repo owners, they will have some back and forth. This is another big point of confusion, right? Like who can make the decision about whether the code is accepted? Who approves it, and like what is it based on? There hasn't really ever been a central set of criteria for like, how something should be submitted, what the criteria should be for implementing something platform-wide. And then there's a decision, right? It's either accepted or it's denied. And this is not often an easy decision to get to, again, because we haven't had a great set of criteria for when to accept something, when not to accept something. And if it's not accepted, it's a huge shame, right? Because there's been a ton of work that has already gone into the project or the contribution. And so it's often a case of, like, it's not the project itself that's the problem. It may just be in how it's implemented, and it might just be a small thing that could be tweaked. But getting to that, like, understanding is just a long and arduous process. And so these are the things that we wanted to sort of shift around into a new workflow that would work better for everyone. I also don't need to walk all the way up here. Okay, so this is the new process that we are proposing. And while it may look a little bit more complicated, we're hoping it's actually more streamlined once we walk through it. So the first problem that we outlined, right, that the product information should be submitted earlier, we're gonna set that aside for a minute. We're gonna work with what we already have in place, which is like an entire backlog of PRs that need to be reviewed. We'll talk more about getting that product info earlier at the very end. But for right now, we've got to fix this immediate problem, which is this backlog of PRs that are kind of sitting there in limbo. Some of them have been there for quite a while. So the first thing we need to do is decide, right, does this actually need product review or not? And this has been one of the sort of trip up points in the past of who does this go to? Does it go to an engineer? Does it go to a product person? And so over the past couple of weeks, we've actually worked on creating some guidelines to analyze or decide whether something needs product review, and we'll talk about those in a moment. If that answer is yes, so this is like a yes or no flow chart, basically, like a tree. If that answer is yes, it gets queued for product review, which basically means it will be put into a subset of PRs that need to go to some product person for review. From there, we ask another question. Does it meet the requirements for product review? And this has been another historical pain point in the process. Ryan was mentioning there's often not enough context, there's not enough background information for a product person. Like most of us, I mean, I speak for myself, but most of us don't read the code, right? We don't get into the code base. And so it's often difficult for us to discern from a PR, like what this is. And so as a result, we can't actually like describe its value, which is a huge impediment to actually analyzing it and reviewing it. So again, we've come up with some criteria for whether it meets product review or not, which we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, another yes-no decision. If it is yes, it means it's ready for review and it would go on. If no, it needs more product information. This is a point where we would open up a communication channel with the author or the people who are contributing to the PR. And again, this is like the third pain point, right? We have not historically been very good at communicating to contributors what they need to include in the PRs. So this is kind of a two-way problem. So we've also created some guidelines to enhance that process so it's clear what we need from the people who are contributing. So that communication process would happen between the product, sort of like a product triage role, and the author. We get the requisite information, and all tickets eventually land here, like ready for product review. So the idea is that before it even goes to the right product person for review, we have all of the information we need in order for that product person to do an easy and successful review. From there, it goes into product review and comes to another decision point, right? Is this contribution acceptable or not? And this is the third set of criteria that we've been working on actually defining, helping product managers understand what they're reviewing against, right? Like why would it be rejected? What are the main reasons why it would be potentially rejected? The goal is to pretty much accept as much as possible within the scope of how we're thinking about broader platform strategy or certain parts of the platform. If it is accepted, then that's simple, right? Product review is done. And there would be some back and forth between the product manager and the author on the ticket, basically saying, yes, this is a go. If it's a go, it goes back to the engineers, and then it goes through the rest of the technical side of this process. If the answer is, ideally we don't ever have like a no, right? Ideally we sort of move into this maybe space. This is where we get into often issues, like some examples that we've seen are like, this is a great contribution, it's just not implemented platform-wide. So what can we do to actually make this implemented across every area of the platform where we want to see this feature enhanced, for example? So the idea here is that there is, if there are issues with the PR, that there's back and forth between the product person and the contributor to land on an agreement about what do we need to do to enhance this PR. This is also where I think teak role can start to step in. We're building this backlog of things on the product roadmap, and so if there are PRs that are could be scoped more broadly, we can start creating buckets of potentially more community-funded contributions where we can start to add resourcing to some of these projects so that we can implement them more broadly across the platform. So eventually there would be a decision made about whether the contribution is accepted. If that answer is no, we would need to assess, like, do we actually need this contribution, right? Is there a reason that maybe it's just an implementation issue? If that answer is yes, we need the contribution, but there's like a scope issue, like I said, it would go into the backlog. Or no, hopefully we wouldn't ever, there won't be many, if any, that land here, but in the event that certain criteria are not met, we would reject something. So this is the workflow that we're sort of proposing.
I think it's important to note that this is for contributions that are like feature level contributions that change user behavior, user experience, could impact outcomes for a learner or outcomes for an educator. If it's like a patch or a fix, those things are not likely going to be flagged for product review. So we're not talking about all PRs or anything like that, just as a set some examples.
Yeah, that's the perfect segue actually into.
Oh, perfect.
So like I said, the first set of guidelines that needed to be created is answering this exact question, right? Like, does this need product review? Not everything needs product review, right? Like, we don't need to be diving into, like you just mentioned, like technical patches and security, like those sorts of things. You don't want us touching those at all. We created the set, so these guidelines are all available now on the product management wiki, but it's pretty simple for product, right? Like, does it touch an end user? Does it impact the learner? Does it impact the course author? Does it impact any of the admin roles? If that answer is yes, it needs product review. It's pretty straightforward. Or likely, the other way to think about it is like based on platform area, right? Like, does it touch Studio? Does it touch content libraries? Anything front-end facing or user-facing? So this is, I just put in a couple of examples here to kind of grease the wheels before Ryan dives into the actual workshop. What do you think? Does this need product review? So the change is, there's a proposal for a new feature to change the scheduled date-time inputs in Studio to user-specific time zones, right? So is this product? Yes, no? Yes, very product, right? What about this one? Exiting full screen video does not return to the correct scroll position. And here's one more. Adding functionality, or like right there is your key, right? Adding a new feature to enable course teams to add, change, or edit course modes directly in Studio. This is, and it's an awesome contribution too. It's a great idea. All right, so that's the first set of guidelines. Second set of guidelines is what information does the author or the contributor need to include, right? So what does the product manager need for something to be reviewed? So like we've been saying, this is often one of the biggest pain points or challenges is that the product manager just doesn't have the information they need to assess, like what is the value or what is the impact of this. And so these are the things that we have decided should be included with every PR. An explanation of the problem, so we just want to know what are you solving. A description of how the user will be impacted and who will be impacted, right? Is this something that will impact learners? Is this something that will impact authors? This one is huge. Screenshots or a video that actually show what the change is. Like, we need to see it visually. We can't discern from the code. We want to actually see what this looks like in the UI. And then any sort of reproduction or testing steps. I'd included a good example of a screenshot or video, but I'm actually going to,
It doesn't click. I just have it open in another tab.
We'll skip that for time, because you need time to do your workshop. The final set of criteria is for product managers, right? Like, how do I, as a product manager, assess or analyze this PR? So what should a product person be looking for? Goes back to what we're asking people to submit. Like, is this problem actually solved by this new feature or this change? Is there clarity on how the change will impact the end user? Like, do we know what the learner experience will be? Is it clear that the change will not negatively impact some other part of the platform? And this is where, like Ryan mentioned, most product people have a pretty good bird's eye view of the platform, and so can start to like guess or think ahead as to like where there might be a potential collision with a project that is upcoming versus a project that is being contributed. And then this is a big one. Is the change being implemented comprehensively? And I think Ryan's going to talk through a couple of examples where we can see that this is one of the biggest pain points that we've run into with PRs, and maybe what we can do to get ahead of that in the future.
Awesome. Thanks. Cool. So I'm actually going to take us through a couple of real-world examples here. So the first one is, let's submit a product roadmap issue. If you would like to, open up your phones, hit the gigantic QR code up there, or use the tiny URL. It's tinyurl.com/roadmap-entry. I thought it was underscore for a second. And what we're going to do is I'm literally going to do this live in front of you. I'm going to create a product roadmap entry for the Open edX product roadmap. Fun, right? So let's see if I can do it fast. Okay, so this is the roadmap. If you've never seen it before, that URL will not take you to this, but what it will do is take you to a form. Set of forms. Jenna mentioned this in the keynote earlier today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Open edX roadmap issue submission, and you're going to see that it has a bunch of sections in it, like abstract, context and background, scope and approach, very similar to like a product requirements document format that you might see. And the one I'm going to be adding is social sharing of course videos. This is something that one of the teams at 2U is currently working on, and we just recently got it to a place where we think we can put it on the roadmap. So I have a doc here that already has my content, and I'm going to start just dropping that in, but an abstract just to kind of give us a general understanding of what's going on. I'll pull this out. Let's go real fast. Sorry. Some scope and approach. What do we tend to do? Describing it. I do not have screenshots, sorry, Jenna, for this particular one. The value and the impact. Oops, I missed that already. We're going to move it down here. Scope and approach goes here. I feel for engineers who have to code live in front of people. I'm just copying and pasting things, and I feel the pressure. A couple milestones. I don't know which named release it's going to go into yet because I don't know how long it's going to take to complete it. So I'm just going to put TPA. And
for any of these fields, like NA is fine, right?
Yeah.
We'd rather have the ticket with half the information than no ticket with no information.
That's right.
So.
I'm putting Q1 because, hey, why not, right? It's only one more day till Q1, and it's 2U. So I'm going to submit that, and now we have a product roadmap submission here. Oh, did I get a flag? Context and background. I don't have any. Do I have context and background? I do, I just didn't put it in. Sharp eyes over there. Thank you. All right, so that just created a product roadmap ticket. So if I go to the platform roadmap project, and
it actually won't show up.
It actually won't show up?
No, because it has to go through a approval process.
Oh, yeah. It's right. It has to go through like the, yeah, I'm sorry. Anyway, it'll eventually show up on the platform roadmap. And once it does, then we can assign a product review person if it makes sense to be product reviewed. This one does make sense to be product reviewed. But the team that is doing the work is the repo manager, so it'll be reviewed by that product manager who is in the audience today. So that's kind of just a quick run through of how you submit something to the roadmap. Now let's take a look at, I'm losing my tabs here. Let's take a look at taking a look at one of the actual submissions that is already on the roadmap that we want to take a look at in terms of like, does this fit like product review? What does it look like? That kind of thing. So I'm going to open up this roadmap view. So again, this is the Open edX roadmap. It has several initiatives going on across multiple teams, across multiple organizations, across the whole world, which is really cool. But if you go over to the right-hand side here, product pull requests on the right, this is where all the product review or product roadmap tickets that are flagged for review by the triage folks will appear. So you can see this is essentially the backlog for product review right now. There's some great handy tags on these. Just make sure it's big enough. So product review done, that's a recent one that got finished. This one's ready for review. This one needs some rescoping, which is one of the major things you've noticed a couple times here. Which actually, let's just take a look at one of those. So Jenna mentioned this one earlier, changing the scheduled date time inputs in Studio for the user time zone. This was originally submitted as a PR, and then we pulled it out into this product roadmap concept. Then we took a look at it. You can see some conversation here, but there was more conversation on the PR originally. And where we came to was that this date time change was only being made in one location in Studio, and we didn't want to create confusion for folks that where it's in UTC in most of Studio, but local date time in only one place. So we identified it and said, hey, we want to look at a scoping issue here. So we wanted to have a conversation with the organization to make sure that we have the appropriate scope. And then TCRIL is getting involved, I believe, and is going to fund that additional scope. So that's really cool. And we're going to make that happen.
Like with help from, so Brad Brown, who's the other product manager for Studio, is going to help us write the specs. So these are like, how can we make these as collaborative as possible, right? Like for all the people who are involved that touch this part of the platform and this project, right? How can we work together, right? So that we can rescope some of these so that they make sense in terms of being implemented platform-wide.
Yep. This is one that I'm actually currently reviewing. So I thought I'd bring it up just to kind of show you a real example. And you'll see that there's a checklist that has been added here by our triage group, and Jenna did this one, but the triage group is going to add that checklist, which is really nice. It helps you go through that checklist that we just described. But this one is for putting in a waffle flag to allow an enrolled learner to go skip the dashboard and go straight to the course. And so there's just a couple of, it sounds legitimate, pretty simple to put in, but there's just a couple of questions, frankly, that I have about that, because I do have concerns about what like the long-term ramifications of having that type of flag in the platform is. So we're having a conversation about it, and that's a great conversation that may have been missed if this just would have went straight in through the PR process, and an engineer was just like, yeah, that sounds okay to put a switch in there, and that's great, let's just do that, right? Which is no fault of anybody, but it's just nice to have the discussion and the comprehensive discussion about like, is this good for the learner, is this good for the platform? So that's just a real world example of literally one that's happening right now. This product roadmap is visible. You all should have probably gotten into it. If you're not, you can get into the slides and you can click into it. And what we'd love to see happen is folks who are product minded and have a particular domain of expertise, get in there and start looking at some of these, comment, offer your opinions and learned expertise there. So just a few notes here. I want to get into Q&A. So check the list of pending PRs. That's the link that I just showed, which is the product review or product roadmap, but filtered by what is in a review column. And then go through it and look at what is the problem being solved. Does it have good scope? Is it full scope across the whole platform? Is there something missing? Screenshots and video. There's a really great video. If we have a second at the end, I'll put it up there of one of the tickets that was put in. Has a nice video to describe what's going on before and after, essentially. And provide links of description of corresponding documents like spec docs or PRDs or something like that. Also, you want to make sure that the information is complete. Obviously, feel free to post your comments and concerns and requests for more information. That's a big part of it, is to say, hey, do you have a document on that? Or can I better understand the use case that's driving you towards this decision, that kind of questioning. And then make sure you tag the corresponding repo owner if you're not the repo owner, which we are starting to create a list of repo by kind of category, not necessarily the direct repos, but platform area. These are the folks who who sort of oversee those areas. So we're starting to put that list together. It's not complete quite yet, but as we continue to add more repos that we go through product review, we'll add more folks to this list. So also, you'll see a community PM list here, and those are folks who have said, you know what, I also have an expertise or an interest in that particular part of the platform. I would love to raise my hand and say, hey, I'll be a community PM for this part of the platform so that when something comes in, I can get flagged too, and I can take a look at it and add my context and my concepts into it as well. So it's not always on 100% on the repo owner to be the one who's constantly in doing product review, although they'll always need to be a part of the final process, right? Okay. Questions? So many. Let's do it. Get a microphone. Where's our microphone helpers? Go to the microphones. Or yell really loud. And repeat the question.
All right, 2 questions. The first question is, if you're an engineer-minded person that wants to get more oriented with product and be able to anticipate the needs of product more readily, are there any resources you recommend for getting a basic view of product mindset?
I think a lot of the guidelines that we went through would be the best starting point. So starting to orient yourself around how can I frame this from like a problem perspective, and thinking about it from an end user perspective is probably the best way to start. If I'm a learner and this is something that's impacting a learner, what's the problem for the learner? So yeah, starting from some of the guidelines we started with, but I would say thinking about it from the end user perspective is probably the best way to orient yourself to think about it from how most product folks are thinking about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Also, there's the wiki documentation that'll be in the product working group. The product roadmap template is actually a good place to start too. It's a very common template of things to ask yourself when you're creating product documentation.
All right. Excellent. Second thing is, if you're looking to invite product-oriented people to review these things, screenshots and videos seem like a great idea, but I also wonder if you think it would be valuable to have automated sandboxes for some of this, because it seems like some of this stuff is not going to be fully understood until you play with it. So I was wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, a couple people have sort of taken the initiative to add links to sandboxes, and that is very much appreciated whenever it's possible.
Yeah. And steps to get in and
do
the thing.
Help us do it. Yeah, help us log in and play with it.
Who's next?
All right. Thank you guys for putting this together. First of all, it feels like a major improvement to how we've, all of the workflow that you described, the challenges, Jenna. My question is, can you describe a little bit more how the product review process relates to pull requests? Does every pull request, with the exception of bug fixes, are they gated by a product review, or kind of talk about the relationship between the two?
Yeah, I think ideally, in the most ideal state, if you think you're about to work on a project that is going to have significant effect on the user experience, that you would put in a product roadmap ticket, and that would initiate the product review process prior to work starting on engineering, which would then generate the PRs to actually move code through the platform.
Maybe we should define PR. Maybe that's just make sure we're all on the same page,
yeah, that's true.
Right? So PR stands for pull request. And anytime there is new code contributed to the open source platform, it has to go through this PR process, pull request process. So the code is submitted to the community and it's openly reviewed by other engineers in the community, and it's given a thumbs up or a thumbs down that the code is good or the code doesn't work for some reason. And so anytime there's, from a product perspective, anytime there's a new feature or a new enhancement, that's a whole bunch of new code that's added. So the code goes through this process regardless. What we didn't have before was that product view of what is this code actually doing, right, for a new feature. But yeah, so every piece of code that comes to the platform goes through this PR process.
Is that clear it up.
Yeah, so it sounds like we're aspiring to get all features through this process.
Not features that meet that rubric, right?
Yeah,
Which is
yeah.
like they impact the user experience significantly. They change a control that would change like the configuration of the platform for the open source release in particular. Like those types of changes. If it's a patch, an update, updating a library to be slightly better performance, something like that, those can skip product review and go straight into the code PR process.
Sure, makes sense. Then maybe one other question. It sounds like this is a new process we're spinning up. How's it going? Like, what kind of volume are we seeing through it? Are we seeing bottlenecks in parts of the system? I'm particularly interested in how me and my team can help things flow productively through the system.
So there's, I think there's currently like 13-ish product PR related tickets that need review. We did like a little bit of like light touch analysis. I think probably 80% of the PRs that come through don't require a product review. So most of the work that's ongoing is all development focused. We're seeing, I don't know, on average maybe like one-ish a week on the product side. So it's not like a huge, we're not getting like deluge, it's not a deluge of it. It's just that there's a backlog of it, which is the problem. Yeah.
It's coming.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. That's great.
Yeah.
Lou, I also have two engineering-related questions. So one, for operators or other types of changes, does that still go through? Do you still want a product roadmap item for those types of things? Like I had a
Yeah.
Yeah.
Err on the side of more product tickets than not. Because on the roadmap, we're trying to track everything, right? Whether it's product-oriented or whether it's developer-focused. So yeah, err on the side of adding even for operator changes or things that would impact the development community for sure.
Okay, great. And the second one is around different engineering possibilities around extending the platform and how much, you brought up the one PR that, or product ticket about the toggle. And there's toggles, there's other possibilities for like plugging in and extending the platform in a way where you can say, yes, you can get your feature, but it's not going to be part of the core. Instead, we need to add to the core to make it possible for you to plug this feature in and get your feature, and wondering what process we have for that so that it's like, yes, but not the way you thought you were going to get it.
Yeah, that's, so there's a couple of angles to that. It's kind of a work in progress, right, of even defining what the core is. We're not quite there yet, but that is our big strategic focus for 2023. Yeah, I would say like submit all of that, right? Like, because the earlier we can ask those questions, like how should this be implemented? Should it be implemented as a toggle? Should it be part of the core, not part of the core? The earlier we can get information about whatever the feature is, the better.
Thanks.
Hello. Thanks for the presentation. So one of the things that used to happen was that once you got a feature with a new feature added to a platform, then most authors would just disconnect from that. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on the maintenance of features for the long term once they get approved by the process?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, the organization contributing is also committing to maintaining it. And that's actually, I'm glad you called that out, because we should probably bake that into some of the requirements as well as like a plan for maintaining the feature. So thank you for that. Yeah, that's great.
Come on, left side. What's going on over there? Nothing from UX? It's okay. Yeah, you're getting pulled in. It's okay. I actually do see some that happening as the Paragon group continues to gain strength and momentum. I think that there's going to be times where product review will say, "Hey, this doesn't look like it's in parity with our design, our design language. What can we pull in a UXer here?"
Or even better, early on, we get notification of new discovery work happening for a new feature that requires UX. We want to be able to go to like a UX team and ask, how should this be implemented? Like, please give us guidance on how this should be implemented. Yes. We have a working group now.
Any other questions?
Got two questions. And maybe, hopefully they're easily answered. So the first one, I spent a lot of time reading the descriptions of pull requests, trying to understand what they're doing. So I have an idea of what's happening in the platform. And I'm wondering, is it a reasonable expectation that going forward, new features will be linked back to the product issue that generated them, so we can understand the context and the decision making that went into them?
Yeah, that's the goal, is that these roadmap tickets will become kind of the entire archive of everything. So we're kind of doing it backwards, like we're trying to like reverse engineer the process right now. We've got the PRs and we're creating like the feature ticket to house those PRs.
Like the epic level.
Or at the epic level. And it should be the other way, right? It should be like the epic, and then as the epic gets developed, the PRs get attached to that epic. And so that's the goal, yeah.
And the other question is, how does documentation figure into this?
That is another great call out on a gap. Yeah, we should include that in terms of, it's the same with maintainership. We should ask for plans for documentation. Yep, thank you.
I have a question that just came up when you used the word epic, about scope.
Yeah.
So like, do you have a expectation for the scope of items that go through product review? So like, you know, a 2-page write-up that was copy-pasted is pretty hefty for, I want to change this, you know, time orientation from UTC to local time. Can you speak to expectations there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the expectations are do what you think is the right thing, but try to meet the rubric, which is if it's clear and concise. I think number of word count doesn't matter. Are you demonstrating enough information in the presentation of the ticket where a non-technical person can understand what the change is going to be and the value that change is going to create? And I think you're set. So you can skip, if you want to, you can skip all the fields, although they are required, so you have to put something in there. But as long as you are giving enough information for a non-technical person to understand what you're trying to accomplish, that's the most important thing. But for big things like ors, right? Like we probably needs to be a little bit more of a write-up, you know, linked back to the wiki, linked back to the working group who's working on it, like so that we have that full length of decision making all the way down into the PRs. Like that would be an idealistic goal, right? Is to have that entire string nice and navigable by anybody who wants to understand how things went. Okay, I think we're at time. So just real quick, recap. If you're planning a major contribution, put it on the roadmap. Include as much detail as possible in your roadmap and PR tickets. And if you're a product-minded person, check out that roadmap from time to time and offer help. Please contribute. We're asking basically product people to start contributing more. So that's the essence of our presentation. Thank you so much.